to the Sitara podcast. The torch is lit, let's begin. Sitara.
All you need is love. All there is love. God is love. So what does all this say? What does Crowley, Nietzsche, Freud, William Reich all have in common? Today we're going to find that out. But first, Mr. Avi.
Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
Doing great today.
It's a great topic, and it's one of those that it could go anywhere, but I think it's highly misunderstood. When we think of love, the first thought is romance.
Right.
But of course, it's much more than that if even the Bible says God is love. So where do we start this off?
We think of love and we think of it from an emotional state. Love is more than just an emotion. That's just a part of it. You have to look at the whole aspect of love in itself. It's enigmatic. We can't, no word itself is defined by the single term while we use it. Love, you have to embrace more than just your heart. It's your whole inner being.
Yeah, I believe that to know what true love is to really find out who and what and why we are.
Right.
It's at the essence of not just our existence, but all existence in itself. And the reason that people default to thinking of it in a romantic way is probably because that's the most visceral way we experience it.
Right.
And it's the earthly way of expressing something that's transcendent. So personally, in my own made-up cosmogony mixed with all kinds of other influences, you have love in the beginning, and that's all there is. And love needs to know itself to be love, so it divides, and you get universal consciousness, a drive, an intelligent logic that drives, but it knows all experiences by the same frame that love knows itself, because it remembers where it comes from.
Right.
And so pieces of this logic, of this universal consciousness, have an ego attached to them, and then they become delusional, thinking they're individuals. And now what they experience could be experienced from a point of view that is individual and not from one perspective.
So in order to truly know what love is, you have to include the individual with the universe.
Yeah, well, yes, in the beginning process, you have to acknowledge that who that individual is, in order to remember that it's without the ego, it's dying to the individuality that allows us into true love.
Right. That makes sense.
So where do we go from here? There is a Nietzschean way of talking about this. Nietzsche talked about the will to exist, the will to live, the power to live. And I believe Nietzsche's kind of misunderstood. This is usually taken as a very dominant, overbearing expression. But what it really means is that there is this underlying force that no matter what will always seek to exist. So that will to power, or that will to live, it's the flower reaching up to the sun, or the grass growing the same way that it's the teenager conquering the other. I mean, that in a romantic sense, that underlying essence of will to experience is that first monad, that first love, seeking to experience itself.
Yes.
So in many ways, the only way to to be able to experience this will to live is to understand that there's a bit of a purpose to us,
Right.
and then kind of like an encoded reason to exist. And that's love using universal consciousness to drive that experience that we will have, that it will have through us.
Right. It's just amazing how a 4-letter word that we throw out there every day is more expansive than we think. You talk about will and love, and you talk about the flower or the plant growing, you know. So that just in my mind in that instant, it made me think about um, our individual will. You know, I can say I love you, bro, all day long, but until I begin to understand that my will, I have to actually know what my will is in order to know what love is. And in turn, it's like going down a path and following your own true will to find out who you are, your purpose. Because, you know, they say, how can you love someone else if you don't love yourself?
Yeah, well, the way that you love somebody else, if you don't love yourself, is to the degree that there is love for yourself. In other words, you will only accept the same amount of love that you have for yourself from others that you have for yourself. It's very complex, that 4-letter word. I mean, I believe that there is nothing else but love. And so it is complex. And you talk about tying it to the will. I mean, that forces us to think of Crowley and his famous phrase, which is,
Do what I will shall be the whole of the law.
and it can't stay there though. Love is the law.
Love under will.
So we have a prescribed way of looking at life to where the expression of love is aligned to the expression of true will. And this is Crowley's best way of talking about the will to live, or
Right.
the power to the will to power. How do you define this and apply this?
I guess, you know, each person is their own star, but, you know, in order to apply it to yourselves is that every day we do things, you know, and within the things that we do, you have to realize, am I doing this for myself or am I doing this for someone else? And in that, you find out what your will is. Is your will to do for yourself or do for others? So then that ties in with love, you know, and your will, well, let me back it up a little bit. Your will can be whatever your will is, but at the same time, you have to make sure that it's a will, not a want, not a need. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people, they ask higher beings for things and they never receive it because it's not within their will to receive those things. So, speaking of will and love, you have to love yourself. And I like the aspect where you were saying that um, you receive as much love from someone else that you love for yourself. And I think that's why a lot of people have problems in life in general, because the amount of love that they dish out. You know, it's a lot of people dish out mediocre love. And behind that basis is they don't know what their true will is.
So the way that Crowley ties in that will is directly connected to a person's purpose for existence. And so finding out what your will is finding out why you are meant to be here,
Right.
And that seems complex, but in reality, it's not. It's simply existing. Life is not a test, and there is no reward at the end. There is no test at the end. It's just about living the best you can and doing something for the existence and the world you're in. So, in Crowley's point of view, you cannot find your true will until you understand that love is submitted to that will. In other words, whatever you live can only be experienced by you because love intended that experience for you. And it's interesting because it almost seems like Crowley saying there is no free will.
You know, there's a difference between free will and actual will.
Right. One is purpose and one is autonomous action. But it does seem like seems to be saying that you're going to live what you're going to live
Right.
because that's your big capital W will. And so when you talk about that, people don't get their prayers answered because it's not in their will. You're defining that difference between a want and something that is a need or something that must be experienced. If it's a need, it must be experienced. And so it's very complex. And so we have a way of understanding life in a very prescribed manner where Crowley says it's love and all there is love submitted to a will. And the best way to live your life or the only way to accomplish fulfillment is when your will, your purpose in life, your actions are aligned. So in other words, you need to define what is your ego and what is your higher self. In Kabbalah, the love is tied to chesed, mercy, but Crawley tied it to Tiferet. And Tiferet, in a Crawleyan point of view, is the holy guardian angel. It's that higher self. So for Crawley, love is that higher self, and it needs to be aligned to will.
Right.
So, in order to align that, we again go back to where we started. You need to get rid of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Crowley had some funky ways of going about that, and that's all debatable, but the message is there.
Right. It's the end result.
It's the end result.
Yeah.
And it's a good end result when you get that, what he called the conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel. Christians have a lifestyle where they are in communication with the Holy Spirit. Or in Hinduism, we have a concept of the Atman. This is all the same thing.
Right.
So in many ways, conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel is a conversation with love.
It's love. And if you really look at anything from any aspect, whether it be religion or just being in school or in life, the main thing behind it is love. You know, if you homeschool a student, in Texas, one of the things is that you have to teach them good citizenship. That's love. So when we look at love, no matter which angle we look at it from, you're reaching a point, which of course, in certain aspects, you can only get so far, and you got to jump into something else to reach another higher point. It could be different subjects, different religions, different schools, different. When don't want to say schools, I say teachings of education, to where you jump to different points to where you reach a different level of love. And in reaching those different levels in the different organizations or education or your lifestyle, when you reach those different points, you come to a different aspect of love. And in turn, each aspect deals with your ego.
Yeah, so I believe what I understood to say is that self-realization is the realization of love in your life.
Right. And when you love your life, that's when you can truly love others. And
Yeah.
once you, and I don't speak of love from the heart. I speak of love as an energy concept.
Yeah, well, it's fun and the energy concept introduces William Reich, but before we get to that, it's interesting to understand that when we see love as this all-encompassing energy flowing through everything and connecting everything and manifesting everything, we it makes it easier to understand that though we live in a dualistic reality, there is only one. And so what you fix in yourself, you fix in others, and you fix in the world. And so good citizenship is demonstrating love to others, which in turn is demonstrating love to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. That's that's exactly right. You know, love is what encompasses us. You know, you've, and I don't want to compare love to what's the opposite of love? Hatred,
Fear.
fear. Well, hatred is is fear of something. Because most people that hate things fear those things, but that's another subject. You know, I don't want to speak of love as in the love fear aspect because love is. Uh, I think I stumped myself because you can fear love for others.
Yeah, so you've been mentioning kids, and it's interesting to understand that when science has shown us when you don't show affection to a newborn, their development is stunted,
Right.
and then they turn around and have a feeling of not knowing how to accept love or rejecting love in their life. And so a lot of times that is where it all starts in your childhood. And it shows us how this is the universal thread. Love is the universal thread
Right.
that connects us and makes us strive towards success or towards our realization of whatever it is. So you mentioned also how it's an underlying energy, and William Reich went as far as saying that this could be harnessed. You know, that's an interesting concept because that's also very similar to the Crowley will, which tells you that when you find your purpose, you then start to project that purpose. In
Mhm.
other words, you project your will, and then reality starts to reflect what that purpose is. So we're talking about manipulating reality,
Reality. Yeah.
you know, and William Reich created these boxes and was trying to heal people, and his methods were debunked by mainstream science, but the philosophy behind it is 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 this underlying connecting energy that could be harnessed to fundamentally change yourself, your life, and the world.
And that's where it comes into where we all have to show love, you know, because if we all show love, we live in a better world. You know, my love cannot interfere with someone else's love. And in turn, my will cannot interfere with your will, you know.
So you mentioned that we're all a star, and Crowley had a concept: every man and every woman is a star. And so in this concept, it talks about how each individual has its brightness, its shine. It has its own stage. It's the center of its own little universe.
Right.
And so, if there is ever an experience of wills interfering, it's because one of the two is not experiencing or living their true will, is how Crowley explained it.
Yeah. So if you have a bunch of stars in a solar system, or if you have Nuit reaching above us, each star is in that galaxy. If one star dies or one star disappears, and the astronomer looks up, the little kid with his telescope looks up, and he sees a certain belt, but it's missing a star, that throws the whole system off. So every man and every woman is a star, and we all partake in our surroundings. And within that, we have to think, or we have to know that my path, on my path, I'm going to bump into certain people. I'm going to go through certain aspects of this life I'm living. So on my path, I bump into you. And whatever interaction we have, it's part of my path. And when we lose our will, it interrupts our path.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to see it. I mean, you must always, I think what you're saying is stay aligned in such a way that you're looking beyond yourself and you're seeing every interaction as an expression of love, so that regardless of whether that other person is living out their true purpose or not, to you, it's part of your purpose. It's
Right.
part of your destined life in a way. So yeah, it's a great way to keep us in check in regards to how we're living. Because when we have a life that's expressed in a capricious way, and we're just trying to force our reality, then we're meant to be bumping our head.
Right.
And so, in order to have the highest quality of life possible, we first need to align what our actions and our the manifested life is with what our will is.
Yeah.
So that's one very structured way of looking at it, and then there's the complete opposite. You have another philosophy out there, which is the chaos magic way of looking at life, and there love has not a prescribed way and does not need to be aligned with anything, but instead is used as an essential energy that could be a tool. So it's infused into whatever aspects of life you're trying to manifest. And then you're able to have a complete flexibility to use this in basically any way you see apt. And in my personal experience, it's probably the most efficient way to live in a magical life. You always try to express love. Now, to bridge those two extremes, Freemasonry comes in and offers a morality that has a structure way of expressing ethics, but also has a flexibility that allows for each brother to find their expression of love.
Right.
And that expression of love translates to the refined Ashlar. So we have that bridge between two extremes, and that's the expression. But ultimately, whether we're looking at it from a Jungian perspective, a Crowley perspective, or uh, chaos perspective, whatever it is, it's essential to understand that at the end of the day, all there is love.
Oh, yeah. And it's going back to what you were speaking on about the Ashlar. So when you're in that crude state, and as you chip away at it in your learnings in Freemasonry, you're you're literally going down that path to where you're finding out who you are and your will. You know, it's a lot of people once they join organizations, religions, or certain schools, they change who they are because they're on that same path, but they're perfecting that path that they're on.
So every blow you give your stone is a manifestation of love to the universe and of self-love.
Yes. Yeah. You have to have both. Otherwise, you will hate yourself and everyone else will probably hate you too.
Yeah, and again, it gives us that symbol of that connectivity, how that stone will be used for the building of something greater. Well, again, we talk about how it's not about the individual. There's a connectivity between the whole, the greater than the individual. And so when the individual is refining itself, it's refining the world.
The world. Yeah.
So every action that you take towards being a better man is an action of repairing the broken universe.
That makes sense.
That
Yeah.
sounds very Jewish too.
Yeah. It's the path that you are on not only affects you, it affects others within the universe.
Exactly. Everything has a interconnectivity that has a cause and an effect.
Right, right. And cause and effect is real and true when it comes to love, you know, because you take example, a person that may want to end their life. A lot of that has to do with love, whether it's love of self or the way that others love them, whichever aspect you want to look at it. If I see you trying to end your life and I interject, you know, regardless of whether you do it or not, the whole cause and effect. If I talk you down off the ledge and you don't do it, that makes me look at myself. If you do jump off that ledge, it also makes me look at myself and it's like, life ain't that bad. You know, it makes you, the cause and effect of love changes who you are.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful the way that you're expressing it because it shows us that love is an ever evolving thing of an action that goes inward and outward. And when we talk about the trick to life is finding out who we are, what we are, and why we are. Well, the what we are a process, an ever evolving
Mm,
process of becoming. And that becoming is the experiential uh, life that love has, or
right,
not life, but expression that that love has in our life. And so, as we are always becoming, we always make that decision of expressing love, of manifesting love, and that interconnectivity has its resonance. So everything so we have Kant who said, think for yourself. And then we have Hegel who talked about a synthesis. So in other words, you have your true purpose. You have the experience that love is trying to experience it through you. And then you have the outward reality. And so you have these two tensions, and then you come up with a synthesis, which is your expression of love in this world. This is our everyday living.
right,
Every action, every thought we take ought to be an expression of love synthesized. And that also shows the interconnectivity and how it has a ripple effect. So, in order to receive, we must be a prepared vessel. We must constantly be going inward and having that introspect, showing self love as we are outwardly.
right, right. I mean, that's a good summary. It really is.
which means we're at the end of this. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Make sure you guys stick around, like and subscribe, and go to Elevator Paso and SitaraGrotto.org.
Woven deep in veiled elation.